Hey folks, Jack here, running through the Tomorrow Movement Recruitment Conversations training on unceded Dharawal country. Recruitment fits across our movement DNA. In order to recruit folks to our movement, we need to be able to tell good stories of what we do and how people can fit into it. We need to be able to explain the structure of our movement and explain to folks how they could fit in. We need to pitch the culture of our movement and how we interact and treat each other, and also the strategy of our movement, what we're fighting for, and how any person that we might be trying to recruit can contribute to our goals. Recruitment is also necessary for successful cycles of momentum. We need to recruit people so we can properly absorb folks and invite them along to our next escalation. And a really useful starting point for doing this recruitment work is having a recruitment mentality. And these 4 points on the slide here are a bit of a first step towards doing that. The first thing to remember is that most people, and I'm sure all of us here watching this training, have a deep desire to feel like they are making a difference in the world. And that's why they want to hear from movements like ours. We also need to remember that if we're emailing or calling folks, we're doing so from our mailing list, and that people have chosen to sign up to this mailing list because they want to hear from us. Often it feels like we're imposing on people by giving them a call or sending them an email, but it's really important to remember that people have chosen to hear from our movement. Another point is that instead of asking a favor, asking someone to do something, when we're recruiting someone to something, it's really important to remember we are providing them with an opportunity to be part of something really meaningful, really important, and really impactful by taking part in our movement. And finally, the last reminder on this slide is that adults can always say no, but only if you ask them properly. If we own the fact that we're asking someone to do something, we're actually giving them a bunch of agency to say no if they don't want to do it. Whereas if we do a soft ask, maybe we take some of that agency away. And when we're running campaigns, we often think of this framework on the slide, which is called the ladder of engagement. And that's the kind of journey we're trying to get people to go on. We want to step folks up from observing our campaign to following, to endorsing, to contributing, etc., so people are taking more action as they go up the ladder. I'm going to run through now a couple of ways we might go about recruiting people to our movement. These are emails, social media, chatting to friends, posting, flyering, and texting and calling our database. Of course, each of these methods have pros and cons. For emails, a pro is that, of course, we can send an email out to our entire list so we can reach thousands of people pretty quickly. We can also target specific segments. For example, if there's an event happening in Sydney, it's easy for us to email everyone who's on the Tomorrow Movement database in Sydney. It's also easy to put lots of information and detail in emails, and we can schedule them to go out at a good time when we know people will read them. Some cons of emails is that it can be tricky to write emails that balance having enough information versus too much and being too long. Another con is that only 30 to 40% of folks who get our emails actually open them. And finally, of course, it only reaches people we already have on our list. We're not going to generate any new leads from only sending emails. That compares to social media, where it's relatively easy to make something simple. We can be a bit more casual and silly and show a bit more of our personality. These social media posts are effective for sharing and asking others to share, and that means that we can reach people beyond our usual audience. Of course, sometimes the algorithm doesn't like us and people might not see our post. And of course, if the content reaches beyond our usual audience, there's a risk of being targeted by the right-wing part of the internet, or people who aren't safe for young people to be around might try and join our movement and get involved. We can't filter these folks as easily as on other platforms. Postering is another way we might bring folks into our movement. This is a really easy and fun thing to do with your friends. And it's a really great thing to invite new folks who have just joined the movement along to. It increases the visibility of what we're trying to do and makes us seem really big. And it's really good for targeting specific geographic areas. For example, if we were hosting an event in Coburg, we could put up a bunch of stations all around, a bunch of posters in the streets all around the Coburg train station to get good visibility for the event in that suburb. Some cons is that it's actually quite hard to get people to properly look at posters. Most people walk past them. They can get torn down by members of the public, and they're less likely to get actual sign-ups for events compared to, for example, an email. Flyering, which means having a physical public presence at an event like a market, is good for having real conversations with people and reaching new audience. It's also good for visibility. Folks can see Tomorrow Movement out in the real world and be cognizant that it exists and that we're out there on the street actually doing something. Of course, it's hard sometimes to get people to stop and talk to you on the street, and this can be tiring or demoralizing. And it also requires some coordination, especially if you want to go with a little crew of people. When it comes to texting and calling our database, yeah, the pros are that it's good for having real conversations with our existing audience and catching up with folks and maintaining relationships. It also is really personalized for the people we're recruiting. It's relatively fast to send texts, and it's easy to make sure people have all of the information we want them to have, like the time, the date, and the address of an event, for example. Again, similar to emails, we can target specific segments of our database. A con is that reaching people on the phone is actually pretty hard. It can take a lot of time and a lot of follow-up to have a conversation with someone. We're limited to only our existing audience, and conversations also can take a really long time. We also recruit folks to our movement informally by talking to our friends, colleagues, and others in our lives. Pros are that folks are more likely to come along to something if they're invited by a friend. If you invite someone you already have an existing relationship with, it feels less transactional because you have a relational history that you're building on. And also we reach people we otherwise wouldn't. For example, my housemates aren't on the Tomorrow Movement mailing list. If I invite them in a conversation along to an event, they might not have otherwise seen it. And of course, the con is that this is just limited to the people we know. I want to take a second now to talk about semantics, and that means actually saying what we mean. And that's important because words, of course, have definitions. And this can really shape how someone perceives a conversation you have with them. You might think of the difference between saying carbon tax versus a price on pollution. And some advice for semantics is that we are guided by the 12 Tomorrow Movement principles. You can find them on our website. We always want to assume people will say yes. For example, it's much better to say, to join, sign up here, rather than if you want to join, you can. We also don't want to say thank you when folks agree to taking action with us or in attending an event. Instead, it might be appropriate to say, it's great to have you on board, or I'm looking forward to working with you, because we know collectively that in order to win a future with good jobs, great public services, and a safe climate for all, we need to build a mass movement. And these people aren't doing us a favour, they are doing themselves a favour. So we don't want to set up a service relationship, we want to set up comrades. We are people joined in struggle rather than friends doing each other a favour. Another point to mention here is that people learn about Tomorrow Movement from how we talk about it. So we don't want to kind of perpetuate this volunteer staff power dynamic. We want to use words like leaders, young people, community members, or our movement instead. We want to center asks in the leader's struggle. We don't want to say, we want you to register your event. We want to say, you folks are going to want to register your action, so that people can find it on the website and really empower folks in our movement to take the organizing steps they need to contribute to this beautiful mass movement of young people. To round us off, I'm going to quickly talk about a conversation framework that you can use when you're having a recruitment conversation. This framework is called the 4 C's. The C's are connection, context, commitment, and catapult. We kick off a conversation with connection. We might start by introducing ourselves and why we're here, and ask a few questions about the person we're talking to and get to know them a little bit. And the most important bit about this stage is that we want to find out what someone cares about and what they value. We're aiming for the person we're talking to be talking 70% of the time in this part of the conversation. So for an example, I might say, if I was flyering at the Wollongong markets, I might say, hey, Hey there, I'm Jack from Tomorrow Movement. How are you going today? I'm out here today talking with folks in Wollongong about the No Turning Back Day of Action. Have you already heard about it? I might follow up with some questions about, the social or economic kind of issues that this person is facing, what they think is really important, and what they care about in their community. The next C is context. Once I have built some rapport with someone, once I've got to know them a little bit, I think they trust me, I want to shift the conversation into the topic that I want to talk to them about. And a way that you can frame this is by using this framework called anger, hope, action. So we start by pitching the issue. Maybe our issue is that big fossil fuel businesses don't pay enough tax in Australia. I might pitch that and describe why that is bad and why that makes me angry. And say, for example, we're running a community campaign to make the fossil fuel industry in Australia pay more tax. I would describe the way that I think people can solve it and bring an element of hope into the conversation. And then finally, I might describe how this person that I'm speaking to can concretely be part of bringing that solution about, which is the action part of the conversation. And in this part of the conversation, we want to keep it short and punchy. We don't want to get stuck in only talking about the problem. We want to really highlight that we have a solution that we believe in, that we think will work, and offer the person we're talking to a really concrete way to be part of bringing that solution to life. For example, there is some words on the screen from the No Turning Back Day of Action back in 2020. I'll read it. So the anger section goes, in September, millions of people could be pushed back into the poverty when the coronavirus JobSeeker and JobKeeper payments that the government introduced expire. We can't go back to how things were before COVID. We have to start building something better. Switching to hope. On September 18th, we are holding a mass day of action called No Turning Back. Together, we will demand a recovery that helps build a world that works for all of us, not just big business. People all over the country will organise local actions to fight for a society with good jobs, great public services, and a safe climate. But it all starts here in our community. We're organising an action here in Wollongong. It's only going to be a success if people like you come and join us to take a stand. There's another example here from a fossil-free movement. The third C is commitment. What we're aiming to do in this part of the conversation is to make a clear, concise, and direct ask. We don't want to shy away from asking people if they're keen. Remember, adults can say no to us, but only if we ask them properly. Most importantly, once you ask, leave silence until they answer. People often need time to think. And a little trick that I sometimes use is counting to 10. If I've asked someone directly to be part of something or to do something to help the movement, I will count to 10 in my head after asking them to make sure I'm giving them time to answer. Some example asks are, is this something you'd be keen to be a part of? Or, this action will only be a success if 10 people can make it. Can I count on you being there? Any question like this. We're looking for a really strong commitment for the person we're talking to. The last C we can use is a catapult. And a catapult is an extra ask that we can add on to the end of our recruitment conversation if someone has says yes. This is the stage where we basically lock them in, make sure they've got all the details of what they've agreed to clear in their head. And of course, you can't repeat the details of the event too many times. And it often helps to present the details of the event as questions and walk them through each bit. For example, you might say, the date will be on the 15th of June. Are you free that weekend? The address is at the Princes Highway in Woonona, right near the train line. Do you know where that is? Do you have a way that you could get there? Great. Well, the event starts at 10 a.m. Will that work? Can I count on seeing you there? Do you have any questions? Awesome. Well, nice talking to you, X. I'll see you there. And that's a way that you can kind of wrap up a recruitment conversation. I guess a final tip is that you can never remind someone too many times. So even once you've had a conversation with someone, they've committed to coming along to something, it's really important to make sure that they've got the details clear in their head and are really committed to coming along. So maybe 2 days before the event, you might send them a text saying, Hey, Liam, excited to see you at the event in 2 days' time. Just wanted to check if you've got any questions. Can't wait to see you there. And similar on the day of the event to really ensure they make it along. That wraps up this training. Thanks for listening.